Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. It is so nice to see you here today. I cannot tell you, after months and months and months of having three speakers up here speak to an empty room and the cameras, how nice it is to have our friends and our community back in the room with us. My name's Jane Scott, and it's a privilege and an honor to serve as the president and CEO of the Columbus Metropolitan Club and to be the first to welcome you here. Some of you have never been here before. Some of you have been to CMC many times, but might not have been here during the live streaming format. So just a few things, some housekeeping things. We will be beginning the live streaming right at noon. So our meals are going to be served. We're maybe 5 minutes behind a little bit with meals, but they'll catch up. So they'll be serving as the program begins. And we are streaming live on YouTube. The Columbus Dispatch picks up this live stream, and then it will also run on WOSU next Monday night at 9 o'clock on 34.2, Mike, I think, 34.2. So you can catch it there. You can also catch it anytime on YouTube. If you want to share this program with folks, please feel free to do so. It's on our YouTube, and you can pick it up that way. Just sort of an informal survey. We've been having audiences about the last, I think this is the 5th week in a row now. Just out of curiosity, how many of you have had at least one shot, one COVID shot? All right, leave your hand up if you've had 2 and you're fully vaxxed. All right, our fully vaxxed folks, good. Well, we are grateful for the ability to get that vaccine, and we're grateful for the fact that it's going to bring us back together as a community. So thank you for sharing that. We are still masking, so thank you all for wearing a mask. We know you can't eat your lunch with your mask on, and the speakers won't have their masks on, but after you've finished your meal, would you please put it back on in respect to the folks around the table? And also, quite frankly, the camera pans the audience sometimes, so we want to tell the community that we're safe and that folks are wearing their masks, so thank you. We also have discovered during the live streaming that telephones ring extremely loud on the live stream, so please make sure your phones are silenced. Feel free to get up, take some pictures if you'd like, take pictures of the speakers, post them on Facebook or tweet or Instagram or whatever you'd like to do to let people know that you're at the Metropolitan Club and enjoying a robust discussion on a very important topic. Like I said, the lunches will be served very soon, and our board chair, Steve Marks, will be back up here promptly at 12 o'clock to start the live stream. So again, thank you so much for coming. We look forward to seeing you again.
You guys are old friends now. So we usually don't have this many reserved tables, but we do today. So feel free. I think we have a seat here. It's just going to, we'll have to turn around. Yeah. It happens, so I mean, nice to see you in person. Yes. Hello. How are you? Good. Okay. Did somebody write this?
Yeah, I think Nick Jones.
Columbus Metropolitan Club?
Yeah.
Oh boy. Okay. Hold on just a moment. This young lady in the flowery blouse is our director of events, so she'll look up here and see. Yes. Yeah, we actually are sold out. You can imagine. I mean, I'm so excited. I can't tell you. but I just don't know how close her seat count is. Yeah. Okay, okay. Oh my gosh, me too.
Hi. I am with Nick Jones's table, or so
There's no Nick Jones table. What's your name?
Andrea Mortensen.
She's from Eastern my children.
I did not get your name at all. Weird.
Okay.
I just want to make sure. I know he was doing the all call for people, so.
Okay.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. And welcome to our in-house audience. It's good to see you again. I'm Steve Marks, Chair of the CMC Board of Trustees and President of Hannah News Service here in Columbus. Let's begin by welcoming several new members. We have Nick Pavlik with Huntington, Angela Zodi and Michelle Crandall with the City of Hilliard. We've got Brittany Strickland Hilliard at Star House, Bill Hedrick, Franklin County Municipal Court candidate, Yaima Jean, Roger Fox with the National Center for Urban Solutions. Conversation moves us forward, and members power our conversations. We'd like to invite you to join CMC. Membership is very affordable and a great investment in yourself professionally and in the community. And I just read a list of folks who took that initiative and joined, and we should thank them. So. Metro Club live streaming is presented by the Emergency Response Fund of the Columbus Foundation in partnership with the Columbus Dispatch and PNC. Thank you. We'd also like to thank those of you who purchased a virtual seat for today's forum. We are very grateful for your support. You can learn more about CMC, register for events, join or renew your membership, purchase a virtual seat, or make a donation anytime at columbusmetroclub.org. So many stories in the news these days report on a variety of human violence. Young adults run amok, the death of black men and women at the hands of those employed to protect us, regularly occurring gunshots and deaths in the inner city. Are these unfortunate consequences of a pandemic, or are they deeper issues at hand? We are better than this. Addressing violence for real change and a safer community is our key topic today. Please welcome President, Columbus City Council Pro Tem, Elizabeth Brown. Founder and CEO, Remember Us Urban Scouts, Miguel Geno Tucker. Lead juvenile judge at the Franklin County Court of Common Pleas, Elizabeth Gill. Director of Dominican Sisters of Peace, Martin Tempore Center, Yahaira Rose. And our host, Chief Content Director for News and Public Affairs at WOSU Public Media, Mike Thompson. Mike, the stage is yours.
Thank you all for coming. It's nice to see people back in a room together, and thank you for coming to this important discussion. You know, 2020, of course, was a bad year for many things. It was a terrible year for murder. Cities across the country saw huge jumps in their murder rates. Chicago, a 50% increase in murders. Los Angeles, 30%. New York, 40% increase. In Columbus, 2020 was even worse. We saw a 69% increase in our murder rate last year. 176 people lost their lives to homicide. As bad as 2020 was, 2021 is off to an even worse start. So far this year, including this morning's death, we've had 66 murders. We did not hit that tragic number until July of last year, and here we are at the beginning of May. So we're here to talk about what are the things that are causing this, and some of the things we can do to try to reverse this trend. Geno, I'll start with you. During past spikes in the murder rate, officials have been very reluctant to blame it on any one thing. They say we never know why things are spiking. This time, people are pretty much in agreement that the pandemic is the reason why these cities have seen the spike. Is it that simple? Is that why?
Thank you, Mike. I would say the pandemic opened the doors for the United States to see a lot of issues that were already there that have not been addressed, that have been overlooked, and that many races and cultures have neglected to really pay attention to because it did not come to their door. The black community, the brown community, the minority community has been suffering. And what the pandemic allowed was for us to see that suffering and for us to understand that we can change it. We have the ability, the government has the resources to change it. They did it in under a year. So it shouldn't take too much longer. It shouldn't be 100 years later and we still are going through the same trauma the families are still experiencing the same disengagement to the low-income communities as well as investment. So I would say the pandemic allowed the United States to look at itself and be like, dang, we messed up.
When you look at the numbers, it's a 69% increase. These problems have been here for a long time, but to see that spike, is it because of more idle time, lack of counseling, lack of face-to-face interaction with mentors who might be able to prevent some of these shootings from happening?
Definitely, and I would say again, it's been that way. Here in the state of Ohio, our counselor array is 432 students to one counselor. That's an impossible task for us to put on our counselors. And I would like to also mention the amount of reliance we have on our teachers. You know, our teachers are underfunded, our schools are underfunded, but we rely on our teachers to be the ones to hold our kids together. The pandemic showed us that without our kids going to school, without our kids having the access to additional resources and services, after-school activities, as well as mentorship and programs to really hone in the skills and the trauma. You know, it's a layer of trauma that has not been addressed for the Black community, for the brown community. You know, our parents, our ancestors was murdered. They was conditioned and programmed to think that their life was less worthy than anyone else. So when you give them no school, no resources, no after-school programs, no jobs, you see the community crying out for help.
Judge Gill, you see this in your courtroom, virtual or otherwise. What do you blame the spike this year on?
Well, I think that I would build upon what Geno has said, because what I think is really at the core of this is that our families are in such state of distress. And I'm often out talking about what's happening on the juvenile side, but as a domestic and juvenile court judge now for almost 15 years, I cannot tell you how marked the increase is for across the board for families and the crisis mode that they have been in over the last 14 and 15 months. Geno, you're absolutely right. The issues have always been there. The needs have always been there. But the situation of the COVID crisis has just brought it out. Our domestic violence filings are up significantly. The actions within families that are processing through divorce, the heightened violence and anxiety within there, and then of course with our juveniles and families across the board. And I just think our families are truly without basic needs and without basic supports. And so what happens is that families and parents can't literally hold themselves together enough, and they're reaching out then to the court, to the police, to folks to try to help situations that really, if they had their basic needs, if they had the supports that they need, if they had access to good mental health treatments when they need it on an ongoing basis, then they would be more able to handle them within themselves. And so if you had a family that had mental health issues before and did have some access to some support and counseling with respect to that, a lot of that was shut off for at least 30, 60, 90 days when the COVID shutdown happened. I mean, that's what happened to our court. We always remained open, but we went down into COVID shutdown mode that we were only really touching those truly emergent things. And it took us about 90 days to 120 days to get the technology in place, as did the same thing that happened with mental health providers and all the other support systems. And you leave that gap to a already shaky society, it was bound to happen.
Yahaira, what are you seeing? Is it simply the kids weren't in school? When it comes to young people anyway, but not all this violence is committed by young people. Is the pandemic, are we putting too much credit, giving too much credit, too much blame to the pandemic? Or has it, in other areas, just shined a spotlight on the problems that Geno mentioned, like healthcare disparities, income disparities, and we see it in the murder rate?
I
completely agree. And first of all, I just want to start with this gratitude because we have the space to have this conversation. So thank you so much for being here. And Geno, what you mentioned on how the spotlight was shined this last year on the issues that we have was greatly. We saw it on our kids. At the beginning of the year when the system shut down, when all of the schools shut down, we saw the changes, and we were so fast to pivot and change on the address that we have to provide materials, we have to provide, trying to fill some of those initial needs that they have. But it goes deeper than that. I think what happened this last year was not only brought that, but it brought all these other layers that we have to address, and we have to start finding all of these other organizations that could help us serve some of those needs from the kids, from the families. I think that one of the areas that we were able to expand on, not only on the kids, but on the family, and as Geno mentioned, the teachers. How is it that we also support the teachers to support the students? So it is layer after layer that we had been uncovering to be able to share and to be able to serve our families.
Councilmember Brown, the politicians always sort of get the calls, get the emails, get the criticism that they're not doing enough. Much of this is, there's so many factors that go into this. What can policymakers like yourself do to reverse this?
Well, I really look at what do families need, I think, to start this conversation. And COVID or not, what do families need? Whatever kind of family you are, dual head of household, single head of household, grandparent head of household, you need stability, you need resources. You need some kind of certainty in your life. And those things, as Geno said, were, too often not present in our communities before COVID. But when COVID hit, what do we know about COVID? COVID hit, in terms of the rates of infection, our Black and brown communities the worst. The unemployment that resulted from COVID hit low-income industry sectors, Black and brown communities, especially Black and brown women, the worst. So you go back to what families need, and all of those things families need were tested beyond really anything recently because of COVID. And a constituent of mine that I stay in some close contact with throughout COVID, I'm going to protect her identity. I'll call her Brenda, but Brenda has 2 daughters in public school. And Brenda has some of her own mental health challenges. I'm thinking about what Geno and Judge Gill said. She has some of her own mental health challenges. Well, COVID brought about an extreme scare in her younger daughter in terms of mental health. Now Brenda is faced with trying to manage her own health, and she left her job because her daughters needed her care so much, needed to be homeschooled. And layered on top of this, her daughter, in a very developmentally important kind of preteen stage, needs mom so badly. What does Brenda do in that circumstance? How do you navigate all the demands for you to create those things that we know families need? And that's where policy can actually come in. I truly believe that policy, in partnership with community groups, because City Council has been working in partnership with our community to help provide these supports. So I want to highlight a couple things, and I'm sorry for the long lead up, Mike. But we are really thinking about addressing the decrease in crime by investing in high quality programming for youth. Right here on this stage, you see proof of that. And we have created a fund specifically to invest in programs that help build resiliency among youth. But also, we want to invest in programs that intervene in that violence, that actually fight gun violence. Those networks, those high-risk networks, really are about 0.5% of any given population in urban areas that are actually involved in these really high-risk networks where you see most of the violent crime. And the violent crime this year is perpetrated by younger and younger people and victimizes younger and younger people. And so we know that the presence of COVID and the lack of these supports through school and community programmings are all intertwined. But again, we're talking about a small percentage of the population where we can actually go out and invest in intervention strategies. So that's what the city is engaged in. And I just really quickly, but I want to also add the importance of what's happening at the federal level right now. The American Rescue Plan has in it an expanded child tax credit where families will receive $3,600 for children under 5, $3,000 per child over 5, and up through dependency of age 18. I can't stress enough how important I think that is, because again, going back to what families need, what do they need? Stability and resources. And for us to pretend that they don't is really just pulling the wool over our own eyes. So actually getting money into the pockets of families will help create the social supports we know knit the fabric of a stronger, healthier, safer community.
Go ahead, Judge.
I just want to build on that because I think you hit such an important point. Intervention, intervention, intervention. In the past, I feel that interventions have been pushed more aside or not as relied upon due to the expense and the emergent situation that's before us. I think almost every study, every time you look at what interventions do, in the long run, they save us money. They not only save us lives and they make for a healthier society, but our public officials' willingness to invest in our youth saves us money down the road, saves us money. To house a youth at the Department of Youth for 1 year costs about $180,000 per youth. If we invested in them while they are there on the streets, while they are learning, while they're becoming young entrepreneurs, way less than $180,000, we might save them from that. That doesn't even count if they go on to adult prisons. And so thank you for investing in our future that way.
Geno, what programs should the city focus on? What is the most effective way to invest?
I'm glad you said that. And once again, thank you, Councilwoman. We all friends up here, but I would like to go off of the intervention. We need a heavy investment in prevention, because by the time that intervention happens, especially if they're in the age of, becoming young adults, that jail sentence that they're going to receive is not going to help rehabilitate them. It's going to make them worse. The programs and the access to programs inside of the jails and the juvenile detention centers do not help our youth. So we need more money invested in prevention, not just as much as intervention, because if we build up, and I'm gonna say it like this, the foundation, if you do not have a strong foundation, anything that's built on that will crumble.
Give us an example of a good prevention program. What does it look like?
I mean, not to toot my own horn, but Urban Scouts.
Toot away, please, toot away.
But, so we work with youth from 14 to 18, and this year we was strategically put a support group for the families as well. So all of our youth that come through our program do a support group once a week where they get mental health services and support. Last year we actually talked someone out of a suicide, just to show you the importance of the mental health piece being involved in the youth programming, as well as I can't send your child home to you healthier than you. Because what does that do? It causes an imbalance to where now you feel like your child is challenging you because they're like, Mom or Dad, the way that you was taught to raise me actually traumatizes me. And the parents don't understand that nor know it because it's never been addressed. So making sure that if we want our youth to elevate, we have to do it holistically. It has to be the families. It has to be the mom. You can't send somebody home healthy and the whole house is not healthy. And then the environment is not healthy.
Yeah. Go ahead, Yahaira.
Thank you so much for bringing that, and I'm so excited that Gina's in here because I am so looking forward to work with you, because we do, and thank you so much for investing, because I totally agree. If we don't bring the family, if we don't bring the teachers, if we don't bring the whole, we're not going to be able to support the child. So when we invest, we do need to do it in the entire community. And I think that when we have organizations like in here, we have so many organizations that we work with, that we partner, that provide services. And when we talk about mental health, you talk about mental health, that is so important. Last year, when we were working with our kids, we saw the needs increase. And not only that, but then we needed to help the parents with mental health, to be able, to your case that you mentioned, it is so important. So when we invest, it has to be on programming. We are working through the Dominican Sisters and Martin de Porres Center on all the family. We work with the child, we work with the teacher, we reach out to the family. We are in constant communication to make sure that we are able to provide the service and provide the resources and the skill to build that resiliency that is so needed.
Councilmember Brown, whatever your position on guns control, I think we can agree there are too many of them out there. They're in the hands of the people who should not have them. What we're doing now as far as guns, I think we all can agree, is not working, whatever your position is on the Second Amendment. So what's the solution, given that the courts are not going to infringe on the Second Amendment, the state legislature, and even Congress is not going to limit gun possession or increase background checks? Is there anything the city can do? I'm thinking of a gun buyback program, something to be creative to try to get some of these guns off the street.
Yeah, I mean, not only will the legislature not act, but they actively work to intervene in cities' efforts to act and control our own destiny when it comes to guns on our streets. It's really problematic, and we need the legislature to. I think about the shooting in the Oregon district in Dayton, and we all know and understand that some shootings make headlines, and everybody turns their attention to gun violence. Guns are a scourge on our streets 365 days a year, so let's be clear about that. But the tragedy in Dayton a couple years ago, Governor DeWine went down and stood next to Mayor of Dayton, Nan Whaley, and the crowd was just kind of taken with their own emotion and started chanting, "Do something." And to me, I wasn't there, but when I saw this on my social media, it was like, something in me was being, lifted up to call out too, because that's the feeling of frustration that so many of us have, where some common sense reforms on guns just cannot make it through Congress, cannot make it through the legislature. And the legislature works to just needle us and limit our ability to do anything on the city. But to your point, we need to think about creative ways, and actually council is working on some efforts, and we do hope to have some legislation in the near future. And it takes a long time to formulate legislation when it comes to guns, because if you don't see around the corner, it will get challenged and struck down by the Ohio Supreme Court based on past laws in the legislature, or the legislature can come in and override. So it is really tough. And that's one of the reasons why we have to continue to demand action at the state and federal level. And we have to double down on the smart things that we can do in our own city to decrease the danger of guns, to decrease the number of families who are permanently traumatized by a gun in the wrong person's hand at the wrong time. And prevention, violence prevention in the first place, violence intervention, and then the third thing is also about rebuilding trust in our community between police and residents.
Let's pick up on that trust for police and residents. Geno, for those of you who don't know, he is the uncle of Henry Green, who was shot and killed by police in 2016, I believe was the year. What can we do to increase the trust? Because residents say they don't trust police, especially people of color, because they feel like they are targeted and abused by them. Police complain that folks in neighborhoods, people of color, will not cooperate them. They cannot solve these murders. How can we close that gap?
I would
I would first like to address the gun situation first. In order for us to really be effective with guns, we have to understand that these young people with guns fear for their life. So having a gun is the literal difference between me being alive and dying. So if you're on the streets and you're seeing your friends killed at the age of 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, you're going to get a gun so that way it doesn't happen to you. So we have to address the fact that they don't feel safe in their communities. The access to guns is, I can go buy a gun right now off the streets. It's too much access. And education. I think education is one of the most important pieces to helping change this gun violence, because a lot of the young people play video games and they think it's a restart. They think you can get extra lives when you kill somebody. I think we have to educate our communities about the importance of the guns, the impact, and the policies around guns. Not only, I remember the U.S. attorney came down here saying that these kids try to scare them and saying they're gonna get 10 years if they get caught with a gun. That doesn't scare a 14, 15-year-old. That means that when he get out, he's 24. That's not fear. So making sure that we have systems and policy in place to actually help that young man when he get caught with that gun, instead of giving him 10 years to destroy the rest of his life. Because once he gets out, what is he gonna go back to? So I had to say that. Secondly,
Keeping communities safe, one of the tools is police. How do we build the trust to try to keep the community safe so that they don't feel like they need a gun to keep themselves safe?
this is very touchy for me, but for one, we did a poverty simulation a couple weeks ago. And if you're not familiar with the poverty simulation, it takes participants through what it looks like to live in poverty. And we did it with the recruits. Am I allowed to say this? Yeah. Okay. Just double checking. And the amount of sincerity that was there, it wasn't none. You know, our police officers, the majority, I'm not gonna say all, come from a lifestyle and a culture that they cannot understand the experience that these young or these just minority communities are experiencing. So if it's a joke to you to see somebody almost losing their kid and then you take a kid for kidnapping, if you joking about that in training, how am I supposed to feel you're gonna react to my community? So I think it's a level of training that they need to have to understand how to react and engage with the Black and brown communities. Because when you see these young people, they are not a threat. So don't approach them as a threat and your outcome will come better. But you also have to be willing to work with us. I'm willing to work with them, and I am the uncle of Henry Green V. So if I'm willing to work with you, you better be willing to work with me. And not only that, the level of intentionality that they need to have when serving in these low-income communities. If you're going to be out there, make sure these kids know your names. So that way, when they're scared for their life, they don't feel like they gotta go grab that gun. They can be like, let me call officer such and such and just talk to him to see what he think I should do. So it's really about building the relationships. And one thing that stuck out to me at this poverty simulation is that when they was play robbing people and kidnapping kids, me and one of my fellow friends was the police officers, and we like, who did it? They're like, we not snitching. And that's a fundamentally problem amongst them. So if y'all are not going to snitch, why do you expect the community to?
Yahaira, you're nodding your head quite a bit here. How would
Yeah,
you?
I completely agree. And I think the conversations, and we talk about less conversation, let's have actions, because we have so many conversations, but we need to continue these conversations, and conversations that are not when you have one side that becomes defensive. And we've seen so many conversations where let's bring our issues out, and then someone quickly just becomes defensive, and that's it, it shuts down everyone else. So we need to have some really open conversations with actions. I've been in several meetings or several conversations where we had the conversation, that's it, goodbye. No, let's just have actions that are actionable, that can be implemented, and then follow up with it, because oftentimes they're not follow through.
Judge, the police complain sometimes that the courts are too lenient. And there's been two things going on in the past year. One is COVID. You want to reduce the populations in jails and prisons because of the spread of the virus. And there's also been a great movement on bail reform and only putting the high level of bail, especially for people of color, people with low incomes, it becomes unfair to them. So where is the balance between taking somebody who is dangerous off the street and also treating them fairly with regards to their ability to continue working and go through the process, the court process?
Well, it's interesting you asked me that question because I was late today getting here because I had a meeting with the suburban chief of police to sort of talk through this issue. And it's obviously a complicated one, but when folks say the courts aren't holding the kids that need to be held or holding the kids accountable for that, it's a conversation for another day to explain the whole process. But in reality, what we have to do is balance. And what we have to balance is this, is that the decisions that we make, we try to make based on the data and the science that we have. And if we had crystal balls as judges or magistrates to decide who to hold, we would be the best court in the country, if not the world, right? We could go back and say, well, if we let Junior out on this, is he going to commit an even more egregious error? So what we have done is really move to a system where we try to assess which youth need to be held for the safety of our community. And those decisions are based on data that tells us that we can cause more harm to a youth by holding them in the detention, and therefore more harm to our society and an unsafer society if we do that. If the data tells us that most youth age out of delinquency, and as Councilwoman Brown said, our violent society, our violent youth is a very, very small percentage, right? And so if we thought holding all of the youth would provide for the safety, the long-term safety of our community, it would be the easiest decision in the world to make because we would just do that. But if we know that one night in a detention center causes a youth the likelihood to not complete or graduate from high school 50%, if we know that one night of a stay in a detention center, pre-adjudication, innocent before proven guilty, right, can cause them to be much more likely to do an additional crime. And time in a juvenile detention center, as Geno says, makes them much more likely to end up into our adult prison. And so what we do are risk assessments, and we communicate now, and we've worked really through sort of, I'm trying to look at our COVID escalation as an opportunity to see where we can go from here and to look at the weaknesses in our community and our society so that we make better decisions. And so we're really trying to assess and get the information so that we can hold the right youth. And then once they are adjudicated, if they are, to give the right services so that when they are out of our jurisdiction at the age of 18 or at the longest 21, we are letting them move forward where they go back into their own communities as healthier individuals.
We want to take questions from the audience in just a few minutes, so if you have them, please approach the microphones. I don't know where they are. You'll find them. You know where they are. But before we get to the questions, about a month ago on All Sides with Ann Fisher on WOSU, David Kennedy, he's from John Jay College in New York City, a nationally known criminologist. He's helped reduce gun violence in cities like Boston and things like that. He says discussions like this can be harmful. And this is why he said that. He says that the tragedy is real, violence is real, we should not dismiss it. But he says, statistically, it's been mentioned here today, statistically, the folks responsible for the violence is very small. And most of the people who live in so-called dangerous neighborhoods are hardworking, peaceful, resilient people. And by having this discussion without putting that in context, will stigmatize those neighborhoods. It will stigmatize the people who live in those neighborhoods, particularly people of color who live in those neighborhoods, and that leads to policy decisions like the war on crime or the war on whatever, and interactions with police where there's mistrust. Geno, what do you think of that? What do you think about the context of this discussion? Is he wrong? Does he not understand what's going on in a neighborhood like Linden where you grew up?
I wouldn't say he's wrong. I think he's referring to the media coverage. Like we said, the percentage of these violent offenders is so minute that it shouldn't be covered on every station all throughout the day. Yes, we need to be informed of it, but how often do you see our organizations on the news as much as you see our young people being killed or robbed or victimized? You know, we have to show them that we think more of them before they believe in themselves to think or do more. You know, if all I see is the media, the entertainment depicting us as violent, we can go back to, I can't remember the movie off the top of my head, but All Black Faces, they killed everybody. What's it called? It could be any movie, but
John Singleton movie from L.A. from back in the 90s.
Y'all know what I'm talking about. We ain't gonna spend too much time on it. But when it's depicted that you are a super predator, as Hillary Clinton said, a super predator, how do we expect for people who live right there to not be in fear of a young black man walking down the street? And let's just say his pants are sagging. Oh, now you thinking even more. Oh, he got a hat on. Now you're thinking even more. You know, we have to, these conversations are needed. These are hard conversations. And hard conversations are the ones that depict and root out what needs to get done, how to do it, and call people on their BS if they're not gonna do it.
All right. It's our tradition here at the Columbus Metropolitan Club to take questions from the audience. We ask you to come up to the microphone, say your name, avoid political speeches, and we are being videotaped live on YouTube, and you'll be on TV, so if you have lettuce in your teeth, you've been warned. Go ahead, sir.
I appreciate the disclaimer that you put out there. I had no intention of coming and making a political speech, but I did want to, I wanted to address one comment, but I also want to expand upon the poverty simulation that Geno referenced. So my one comment relative to what we can do regarding detention of young people, I think very candidly, we can do something with sentencing, and you may be alluding to that to some degree, but the sentencing is where we probably have some way that we can be more innovative, and I'll just kind of put that out and put it on the shelf for people to think about. But the poverty simulation, my name is Robert Caldwell. I direct a nonprofit called Answer Poverty, and I work with the Community Caring Foundation for a lot of the programming that we're doing in the Linden community now that Geno's involved in. And we had an opportunity to do a poverty simulation with the 135th recruiting class of the police academy just last month. And it's an immersion experience for the officers, and it simulates 1 month in the life of the families and individuals that they are portraying. And while there was, like Geno referenced, a few of the officers who didn't appear to be taking it as seriously as it was intended, the vast majority of the comments that were made and the feedback that we got from the officers was that it did have a real significant impact on them in the sense that they had a little bit more empathy or a better understanding of the reality of poverty and how it is experienced. But the question goes to City Council and other folks who are making decisions about how police training is done. When you think about it, how are you organizing your thinking about training in reference to not just empathy building, but what are you doing, or what are you all emphasizing in the reform you're calling for as a way to kind of revitalize training or to change the way police training is done?
Thank you for the question and for the work that you do. So, really what I think this gets down to when we talk about training is we're trying to change the culture, right? Point blank. If any one of you in this room thinks we don't need to change the culture at the Columbus Division of Police, I would be surprised at this point. I think it's pretty clear that culture needs a change. It's very hard to change culture. And part of that is training. Part of that is recruitment. and I will talk a little bit more about training, but since I said recruitment, I mean, I want to emphasize that the numbers as they are now are pretty unacceptable, that only about 20% of our officers live in the city of Columbus. But you peel that back and only 8% live in a part of Columbus that isn't in a suburban school district, right? So the empathy that Geno felt lacked in the training among some of the folks, I mean, that's made even harder when only 8%. Under Ohio law, we can't have strict residency requirements, but there is more we have to do to help attract officers who live in the neighborhoods where they work. And that will do a lot to change culture. We're doing an overall, sir, more distinctly to your question, we're doing an overall audit of police recruitment, civil services, hiring practices, all of those things, and our training. Training is, I think we train for the wrong things, and that's a battle that we, personally, I'm not speaking for council, I'm not speaking for the city, I'm not speaking for the chief, I'm not speaking for the director of public safety, right? I'm speaking for Elizabeth Brown, and we train for the wrong things. We spend so much time getting our officers to understand how to pull that gun out and shoot someone, and we spend very little time trying to get them to avoid doing it at all. And I mean, frankly, no one should be murdered by their government. I do not believe that the government should end people's lives. But that's what happens in communities far too often. And we have to do everything we can to avoid that from happening. And so, to your point, sir, I think we train for the wrong things. And actually making that change is a true uphill battle from the council side. We have to push and push and push. When we tried to delay a recruit class to wait for some of this audit, and you can have all kinds of opinions on that, I was in favor of doing that. Part of it was that we need this audit. We really need something to inform us so we have that leverage to do things differently within the division.
Yahaira, you want to chime in?
Yes, and I would really like to add that as far as training, and my human resource cap just comes on right away in recruitment, it's the cultural competency. We want to make sure that our officers, they have language, or they have resources, or they have cultural competency to help a lot of our communities, because as our communities increase and become more diverse, we want to make sure that we serve them at that level too. So I hope that you add that to your checklist as well.
Thank you.
Geno, we'll get to the question. What would it take for folks, black men like yourself, that you grew up with, to become police officers?
Yeah, I can't say a lot of the answers, but I think it's the intentionality of relationships. One thing, and Councilwoman, since you get to make a lot of decisions, I would definitely recommend the poverty simulation for the remaining classes of the Columbus Police Department, because what I didn't mention is at the end of it, when we did our small group facilitations, a lot of them were taken away. A lot of them did understand where I was coming from, and none of them knew who I was until the end of it. So I would let them play out and talk and do everything before I told them they killed my nephew.
So is there any hope of diversifying the police department from your neighborhood?
If they come out in the neighborhood like the drug dealers is, and, you know, be out there in the community playing ball, you know, bringing their kids to the community so our kids can play with their kids. Like, you do that, and then maybe some of the young men or women be like, man, you know what, I want to be a police officer.
And so there's actually, it's a small thing, but I think a very cool thing. We had a program at the juvenile court called the TAPS program, the Teen and Police Service Academy. It's an 11-week program where police are matched up with at-risk youth, and they work with them through this 11-week program. City Council actually picked up our program and is going to fund it, and I think try to expand it. And it does sort of what you've talked about, make sure that the police are in the neighborhood and getting to know the youth, and the youth getting to know the police. They may not be living there yet, but at least it brings that commonality that we have more in common than we have different, right? But then it also might be able to, hopefully be able to recruit folks who then establish those relationships and say, I want to grow up and be like him or her.
Jane?
So we have some questions from online folks that I'm narrating here, and then we'll also get to your questions as well. Maybe Dame, how does the lack of affordable housing affect the increase in violence that we're seeing?
I can take that. I do think that I don't know of any studies that draw the direct data, and there may be, and they're probably very good. But I think that it's clear Columbus is continuing to confront affordable housing challenges, and if we can work to solve affordable housing, create more living wage jobs, really housing wage jobs is kind of the way people refer to it now. What do you need to make to be able to afford that roof over your head for yourself and for your family? That will help create safer communities. And it goes back to what I sort of said at the beginning, which think about what families need. If we want our communities to be healthy and safe, we need our families to be healthy and safe. And affording that roof over your head is pretty foundational to having a safe and healthy family. So the tie is direct and clear.
Geno?
I would like to add, it's important, I go back to this foundation. Yes, we need affordable housing, but we need systems in place that take them out of affordable housing. Because once they become complacent and comfortable with living that lifestyle, that creates generations that will continue that cycle. So I'm all for it, but we need to have systems in place that help teach our families, and the young ones and the old ones, financial literacy, how to build your wealth, how to build generational wealth for you and your children, so that way, when you die, you can leave them a house instead of bills.
Just to pick up on that, I think that's exactly right. And what I was referring to in terms of our overall affordable housing shortage is not just vouchers or Section 8 housing, but you look across the income spectrum, and there is not enough housing for people who make 60% of area median income and below, which is above the voucher level too. So there need to be more options for exactly what you said, which is owning a home. Owning a home. When did we, the financial crisis kind of scared us out of pushing for those products, but that needs to happen. So thank you for that.
Sir?
Good afternoon. Thank you to the Metropolitan Club for the speakers, and certainly for our host for today's conversation, critical conversation that is timely. My name is Ani Mwalimu. I have the pleasure, honor of serving as the youth director at New Salem Missionary Baptist Church, particularly our 6th through 12th graders, for whom this conversation is very important. My question is, we have one person representing a faith-based institution, from what I gather, by the name of it. I'm wondering what partnerships, what programs, and what ideas do you have about how the faith-based communities, any faith, can partner with both government, nonprofit, et cetera, to help be a part of the solution, some of the solutions that we're discussing today?
Thank you so much for that question. And we have been, just to give a little bit more context on the work that we have been doing this for 10 years. And we started out with a mobile home community. We started with a lot of research in there. Over the last 10 years, we have been able to grow and create partnership. So just by a show of hands, how many people in here have partnered with the Dominican Sisters of Peace? Can I say it very quick? So we have, and thank you so much for being here as well. One of the things that we have done over the last 10 years is really create those partnerships with government, with other nonprofits, with other groups, to ensure that we leverage the strengths, because we don't have all the strengths and we have made mistakes along the way. So we want to make sure that we leverage the strengths on everyone to provide the service that we need to, as well as create a model that can be implemented not only on an organization, but maybe find another group and work with them to implement the model. So I hope that answers. Does that answer? Okay. But at the end of it, just let me know so we can actually connect. So you can raise your hands too, since we're close. Mm-hmm.
Jay, go ahead. We'll try to get to as many questions as we
Okay.
can. Before we run out
This
of
is from
time.
Evan Clausen. Do the speakers believe the media is hurting their efforts in fixing the violence issues?
Yes. Yes, primarily because, like I said earlier, if you only show them what is shown in the media, that's all they believe that can be. So when we show them that young black and brown men and women are business owners, that are millionaires, that are running organizations like we are up here, this gives them opportunity, this gives them hope, this gives them a belief that they can do it as well.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. My name is Gabriela Loaiza, and I'm part of Proyecto Mariposas working with the Dominican sisters. As a mother of 2 teenagers now, it's very hard, when you're trying to think, how your children think about or how they see the environment. I believe that it's very important that we start early on. It's something that has struck me a couple years ago is when I talked to my priest, and he said that, jails are built based on the number of third graders that are unable to pass the reading test. And that took me really hard because it's like, oh my goodness, so we have to start that early, to make sure that those kids have in their minds that they have to, do well, go to school, go to college. And so I think, there is a need from our communities to start early. For a mother of a 14-year-old, it's hard to tell them, I want you to go to college. It's too late, right? So we need this support in communities like Proyecto Mariposas that, they may not listen to me, but they may listen to Yahaira, or they may listen to Sister Roberta. And so it's important to have that support. So going back to the years, because my husband and I had volunteered a lot with our soccer programs for the Diocese of Columbus, we had, years ago, a gentleman, Mr. Roberts, who had a great idea of having the police officers be coaches for soccer, for the Latino community, especially because we are very big on soccer, and that's a way to bring families together. And unfortunately, he couldn't get the resources to be able to make that happen. So wanted to, to present that idea to our council, but also, commend that we start early on. And I don't know if Ms. Brown, you have any comments on what the city is doing to start kind of getting engaged on early stages?
Yes, we have to start very early, and I would say before third grade, we have to start in early childhood education. The data and the science is very, very clear now about what happens in a child's brain before they turn 5. 90% of brain development occurs before a child turns 5. It lays the groundwork for all of that amazing learning that they can achieve throughout elementary and middle and high school and into sort of college and income earning years or straight into income earning years. Early childhood investment is so critical. Right now, the city spends about $4 million a year to make access to high quality early childhood or pre-K slots available to families who otherwise can't afford it. There's kind of a patchwork of federal and state programs that help families afford. There's a big donut hole for families that still can't basically make it work. So we are investing on that early end, and we have a lot more to do in this community in early childhood. It's something that I hope to create some really sea change in how we approach early childhood in Columbus. So I really think you can't start early enough, and I appreciate the acknowledgement of that and the ideas, thank you.
We are running out of time. We have time for 2 more questions. Go ahead.
I'll be quick. Years ago, they had the Police Athletic League. Yes, you should fund it, and yes, it should be mandatory that all officers participate. But just really quickly, how do nonprofits sort of internally and externally think about and get to pay parity with their community workers as with police? So police officers in Columbus are paid extremely well. If I make $100,000 a year and I'm sending a social worker out with you that's making 40, what do we do for the people that are in the streets, that are encountering these people every day, that are actually doing the prevention work? What needs to happen with funders or sort of internally in nonprofits so that we can make sure that these people are receiving sort of the pay that we see police officers getting?
Sorry, I will quickly say, this is a wonderful question. It's a big one too, and it really comes down to this idea of what do we value in our society? That's how sort of these pay structures are created. If you think of it globally, like truly, that is the case. We've decided that social workers deserve about this much, and police officers deserve about this much, and teachers deserve about, like early childhood educators deserve about this much, way down here, and that's out of whack. And we've really got to, I think, name it. And push for change. But I think practically the way the city can help and the way that Jasmine and you can help and others in your nonprofit network can help is when you're applying to funders, name it as a goal that, you know, increasing the pay for the work of folks engaged in youth development or whatever it is critically important because it demonstrates we value what they do. We value it so much that we're willing to pay for it. How radical is that? So the city in particular, that's something that we try to bring to every contract that we look at. And actually in our $1.5 million we've given on violence on prevention and intervention so far, you know, pay has been something that we've taken a look at, and we want to pay a nonprofit to be able to pay the wages that work.
All right, we have time for one more question. We'll try to ask it quickly and then get a quick answer because we're running out of time.
Gotcha. Hi, my name is Yuma John. I serve as Ms. Black Ohio USA, as well as campaign manager for Mike McAllister for judge. Now, in a lot of conversations I've had, it's people who want to be involved, people who want to make effective changes, who aren't in the position as a policymaker, but they don't necessarily know how to get involved and they're feeling a little almost apathetic. What would be some ways that you would recommend people who are not elected officials get involved to impact the community in this way?
I would say, I would ask my fellow panelists, they have great opportunities. If you're looking to, so I would like them to take most of this answer, but if you're looking to be involved in the policy process, not as an elected official, follow your government officials, attend their hearings, give testimony. You are an expert in your community. I don't care what background you have. You are an expert in your community, so tell us about it.
And I would just say very quickly is invest in your youth. Invest in your neighbor's youth, your sister's youth, a youth you don't know, become a mentor professionally or on just within your own family.
And then a lot of our organizations need volunteers. Like she said, it's a lot of, we cannot pay. Me and my program director been working free for the past 5 months. We're not even getting paid to provide the services that we provide to our youth. So if people are here to help volunteer and help provide the services and help just be out there with the youth, that means a lot to us.
Definitely. I think one of the things that we do with volunteers is that we make sure that it is as valuable to you as it is to our kids. So we want to make sure that the match happens. Please contact us and, like you said, invest in your community. Mm-hmm.
And showing up here and being a part of this conversation also helps. So we urge you, when it gets up on YouTube, to share it with people you know. Share your knowledge that you learned here personally, but also share the video and let people hear what these fine folks had to say. But thank you all for coming.
I hope you found today's forum a learning experience. I think the last question really summed it up. What can you do to get involved? If you thought enough to come here today, then take the next step. There's 2 organizations up on stage that I'm sure would welcome any support you want to lend. Don't miss next week's CMC as we explore sustainability with the premiere of SWACO's 2021 Community Impact Report. Thanks to the Emergency Response Fund of the Columbus Foundation for presenting our live stream in partnership with the Columbus Dispatch and PNC. And thanks to our online virtual seat patrons. Special appreciation to our speakers. We could not do this without you. Again, they were Elizabeth Brown, Miguel Geno Tucker, Judge Elizabeth Gill, Yahaira Rose, I'm sorry, I knew that, and I came up here and I knew I would do that again, and of course, Mike Thompson. We hope to see you again next week. Thank you.